Hey everyone, it's Lisa from budgetequestrian.com, and today I wanted to share with you some of the things that I think are pretty important for you to have before you get your first horse. So I remember when I was a teenager and before I got my very first horse, and actually my first horse was a miniature mule, but before I got him, I always asked for gifts for Christmas and for birthdays, and anytime someone asked me what I wanted to get, I wanted horse stuff. And I remember my mom told me, you're putting the cart before the horse, and you should get the horse first and then worry about all the stuff. But with over 20 years of owning horses, I can see where my thinking was better than what my mom was telling me. One of the important reasons why I think it's better to have all of this stuff is because before you get the horse, you want to be prepared for what you are going to have to be dealing with. And horses are expensive, and it costs a lot of money to keep a horse every month, regardless if you keep the horse at home or if you board the horse out. It doesn't matter. There are monthly expenses that will accrue. So if you already have the stuff that you're going to need for the horse, it'll make it a little bit easier and not such a huge dent in your pocketbook. So these are the things that I think that you should have or consider having before you get your first horse. Number one, you need to have a place for your horse to live. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean at your house. If you aren't zoned for horses, then you can't have your horse at your house. But that's okay, because there are a lot of boarding facilities that you can choose. I would advise you to look at least 3 or 4. Find out what the prices are, and then go take a tour of those places to see if it would be a good fit for you and your potential new horse. So once you've decided where you're going to be keeping your horse, and if you're going to be doing it at your place or at a boarding facility, then it's time to start planning on the fun stuff. So I think you're going to need a halter and a lead rope. This is pretty universal, so if you got a full-size halter or just a horse-size halter, that should be a good starting point. Or you can get the clinician style halters, which that's what I like to use. It's a rope halter with the knots. And then you can buy lead ropes, at least 1 lead rope, preferably 2. I think it's a good idea to have more than 1 lead rope because you can always find a use for it. The next thing I think it's important to consider before getting a horse is you're going to need a grooming tote. And you're going to need all of the brushes and hoof pick and paraphernalia that go in that grooming tote. There's a lot of places that you can find grooming supplies online, different places like Smart Pack, Dover's, State Line Tack. They have a lot of different brushes to choose from. I think you should get a dandy brush and a body brush and a curry, some sort of a curry. You can get the hands-on grooming glove curries. Those are really nice, and I use those a lot right now during the winter. And I also use a rubber curry, and I basically use that for knocking the dirt out of my brushes when I'm using them on my horses. Something else I think it's important to have before you get your first horse is a first aid kit. A first aid kit is pretty important because if you're going to be keeping the horse at home, you have no idea what that horse is going to be like once you get him home. He might get spooky, he might be a freak, you don't know. So I think it's better to be prepared and have a well-stocked first aid kit in your barn, especially if you're going to be keeping your horse at home. I did make a video on my first aid kit, and I keep adding to my first aid kit because I do have a horse that likes to get into mischief, and his name is Ethan, but we call him Dennis the Menace or Houdini because he always seems to get into mischief. So I have a very well stocked first aid kit for that purpose. Other things to consider that you would want, and this can be different on whichever discipline you're doing, but a bridle with a couple of different bits, because you don't know what type of bit the horse that you're going to be buying has been accustomed to. So Snaffle Bits I think are good, like an O-ring snaffle, something with a big mouthpiece that's more gentle for them. And again, depending on what type of horse you're looking at, you might need a cob size bridle, you might need a full size bridle, or you might need an oversized bridle. It's been my experience that if I just got a full-size bridle, it will work in 90% of the horses. So I just got a full-size bridle. Something else you're going to want is a saddle pad. And this again will be determined by the discipline that you're riding. If you're riding dressage or Western or English. You can find saddle pads. Sometimes you can even go to yard sales and find saddle pads really cheap. And I'm always about finding things inexpensively. Another good place to find used saddle pads is on eBay. Or you can, buy new saddle pads. Usually different places like State Line Tack. I know I always say State Line Tack, but they always have really good deals. So State Line Tack, County Supply, Dover's. You can find inexpensive saddle pads there, especially when I'm thinking more English dressage type, but Country Supply and State Line Tack actually have a lot of Western equipment and tack as well. So, but you can usually find really good deals, and it never hurts to have a couple saddle pads. See a lot of people that have lots of saddle pads. It's like they're saddle pad collectors. So you might as well get a jump start on it, and if you find one you like, go ahead and buy it. Some other things that you're going to need, and again, this is my opinion, but I think everyone should have a riding helmet. Regardless if you ride Western, English, or you're just messing around at home. I think it's really important to protect your head regardless of what discipline you ride. So invest in a helmet. And this will be important especially if you're thinking about leasing a horse or riding at keeping your horse at a boarding facility, because most places, if you're under 18, they will make you wear a helmet while you're riding on their property to protect themselves against liability if you were to have an injury. So you don't have to buy a fancy riding helmet. They have Troxel helmets, and I think there's a couple others that are very inexpensive, around $30 to $50, depending on what you want. And then if you determine that you're going to be showing, then you can get the fancier ones later on. But something to protect your head is always a good idea, no matter if you have a horse or not. Some other things that you're going to need are boots, like my dirty riding boots right here. So I got these boots on eBay. They were about $100. I really like them. They're very nice. They're Ariats. But they were inexpensive and they were a good deal. And again, regardless if you are buying a horse, leasing a horse, or just taking riding lessons, a pair of boots is a good idea. You can get Western or English, whatever type you want. Boots are a really good thing to have when you're around horses. Another thing you might want to consider is having a good pair of gloves. Depending on what time of year that you're going to get your horse, you can have summer gloves, like for showing. You can have winter gloves that have like liners in them. Or you can just have general gloves that you're going to use around the barn. I didn't used to wear gloves, but now I wear them pretty much all the time. Keeps my hands soft, and it also, you get used to it. So if you are going to be showing eventually, I think a couple of pair of gloves is a good idea to invest in. And of course, the one thing that we all love to look at and drool over when we have a horse or we're thinking about getting a horse is our own saddle. Some people might think that you don't need a saddle before you get the horse because you need to make sure you get the right saddle for your horse. But I think if you are planning on getting a horse, it's a good idea to have a saddle. There's a lot of different saddle pads that you can get if the saddle doesn't fit your horse at first. And then you can always move up to, let's say for an English saddle or a close context saddle, you have a regular width tree and maybe you need a wide width tree. Or you have a wider width tree and you have a narrow horse. A lot of the different conformation, differences our horses have can be overcome with a good saddle pad. So just getting started, I think it's a good idea to get a saddle, and you can always get a different one later on. In my opinion, I think it's a good idea to have a saddle before you get the horse. Some other things that you need to consider before getting a horse: how many vets are in your area? Is there a veterinarian that's close by? If you're having your horse at your home, is there a vet that will come to your house, and how much are they going to charge you for a house call? It's a good idea to plan on what type of veterinary services are within your area so that in case of an emergency, you know that you have some choices of vets, and you can even, interview them before you get the horse to see if you and the vet are a good match. Someone else that's going to be important for your horse is a farrier. And finding a good farrier is very challenging, at least it is in my area. I had the same farrier for over 8 years, and then he decided to retire. So after he retired, then I had to do a search of finding a farrier, and that was really hard. I did find a guy that I really liked. He did an outstanding job. He was very professional, did a great job with my horses. He worked well with my horses. He was my farrier for about a year, and then unfortunately he moved back home to Michigan So I lost my amazing farrier. So then I was on the search again for a new farrier. And it was really challenging to find someone that would come out or would actually even respond to my emails or my phone calls that I left. Fortunately, I found an incredible farrier who does a really great job, and we actually know him through our kids being in marching band together. So didn't even know that his son was in marching band and our daughter was in marching band. But kind of funny how things worked out, but I was grateful to have him. But the thing is it was really challenging for me to find a farrier. It probably would be easier if you were in a boarding facility, because a lot of farriers will go and then you can make arrangements to, have everybody has their horses done on the same day. But if you're at home and you keep your horse at home, it might be a little bit more challenging. So it's a good idea to have a couple people in mind before you get your horse. And another thing that's important is to have a safe place to ride. So if you're going to be riding at home, and you can afford to have an arena or a designated riding area, I think that's good to plan on ahead of time. Also, if you're considering boarding your horse, what are their facilities like? Do they have an indoor riding arena, which would be amazing? I wish I had an indoor riding area. Do they have an outdoor riding arena? Are there restrictions on when you can ride? Do you have to ride with a trainer? Are there any trails around? These are things to keep in mind and think about before you choose a place that you're going to keep your horse, or if you're going to keep them at home. And of course, the last thing that you need is the horse. So once you have all of your stuff and you have your plan in action, then I think it's a good idea to figure out what kind of horse you're going to get. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it gave you some things to think about and maybe you learned a thing or two. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow.